This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party. I am Tenitra Batiste, your host. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brent Rollins. This is your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. And it is time to get the party started. And on some level, it's always easy, right, to get a party started for the Dogs because they're still number one. They escaped. I call it escape, Brent, but we'll see what you call it, with a 37-20 win against Vanderbilt Saturday. It was a slow start, definitely, for the Dogs, but they woke up in sort of what we call that middle eight, what Kirby Smart likes to call the middle eight. 17 of those 37 points came at the end of the first half, beginning of the second half. So, Brent, as we always start off, we start talking about what we learned. Dogs 7.0, week 7. What did you learn, first of all, on offense in the win?
Three sort of big picture things. One, first and foremost, Vanderbilt's turf stinks. Like, legit stinks.
Yes.
Sucks. Like, horrible. It wasn't just Georgia's players slipping and falling all over the place. Their own players. It was ridiculous. But anyway,
yes.
That's outside of that, the actual game part. Turnovers are obviously bad, and Brock Bowers is obviously important. Like those two things, if you turn the football over, it leads to points oftentimes for the other team. And obviously the injury of Brock Bowers and what it's going to sort of mean and moving forward and all the big picture thoughts of it. And we're going to have a lot, but yeah, that's it. Cause that's the games like that at some point your talent will win. You want to escape injury free.
Yep.
And you didn't.
How about you, Jarvis? When you look at that offensive performance, or just kind of like Brent said, and we'll do a little bit of deep dive and we'll go between the hedges, but what were your takeaways on offense?
I think given with all of the injuries, I like how they were able to close out the game running the football, because it was very clear and obvious. Like Brent mentioned, talking about getting out of there with any more injuries, because obviously they sustained so many injuries with Xavier Truss, and then obviously Brock Bowers, and then Kendall Milton didn't play in the second half. So when you have all those injuries, you saying, okay, Mike, I need you to run the football, and we need to limit them possessions so we can get up out of here. Because like you said, when you talk about like with the turf situation and all the construction, and it was just an awful situation for the Dogs to go up there and have to play in that stadium, and for them to come out with so many injuries. But I do like, though, the one positive I feel like is the way Dajun Edwards was able to run the ball, and specifically to the right side where Xavier Truss wasn't there anymore. And you had a freshman, you dropped that freshman in there, and it seems like, hey, at least he knows how to get off the ball and put his hands on somebody. So I think that, given the situation, I like how they were able to close out that game, shrink that game down, and run the football to close it out.
And for me, what I liked on offense is the fact that they got out of there and they've got 2 weeks to kind of reset and refresh and decide what the rest of the season is going to look like. Because for the most part, at least as far as we can tell for the regular season, you're going to have to do it without your big guy, Brock Bowers. So I just like the fact that, hey, they've got 2 weeks, number one, to let all their bodies kind of reset, and also Kirby and his staff to kind of figure out this thing. But like you said, it looks like they did kind of figure out some things. Not that they didn't already know, but again, good to know that you have a Dajun Edwards to be able to kind of lift you up from the ground game perspective. But we'll talk more about some other aspects of what this means to the Dogs offense. Now let's switch gears and talk about that defense. I thought this was the funniest tweet that I saw as I was watching the game. Well, I guess the Dogs won't be able to have a shutout today. And I just chuckled, right? And I said, yeah, no, but it's interesting because, Vanderbilt scored on them last year. Vanderbilt scored on them again this year. But for the most part, the defense was looking pretty solid. But there were just, moments in time, as just about any defense can have, or any player. So wanted to know from you guys as well, Jarvis, kind of what did you walk away from? And I know specifically there were some players that you were saying, hey, I want to take a look at them. I want them to be my step-up guys. Did you see that on Saturday from the players that you were taking a look at?
Not initially,
Okay.
but I think as the game went along, it seemed like both sides of the football got to get like a little warm-up session going on.
Yes.
Like, all right, let's see how they're going to play this today. And then, okay, let's finally figure it out. The middle part of the game, we'll dominate and go ahead and close this bad boy out. But yeah, I think the main thing to me was in that first, the 5th play of the game, they throw the ball, 49 yards. The guy takes it to the house. It was obvious it was a miscommunication between Tyke Smith.
Yeah, because I remember you're saying you wanted to check. We wanted to see what Tyke Smith was going to do in this game.
Yeah, and I think that he didn't hear me in the beginning, but he did get an interception, right before the half. So they were able to capitalize off of it. So I think that that lull period for the Dogs is something that I feel like they have to get figured out. It seems like if a team comes in ranked, they'll figure it out from the jump. And thankfully, all the SEC games they got left as of right now, those teams are still ranked. So I think that that's encouraging. That hey, they'll be ready to roll. But I think just Tyke Smith able to get that interception. You were starting to put a little pressure on the quarterback in the second half of that game. Mm-hmm. So I think that overall I'm cool with it. But it's just that first drive, that first drive was just like, oh my gosh, like here we go. And but like I said, they're always able to figure it out. But I think that Tyke Smith did answer the call eventually.
How about you, Brent?
Two big long drives. Like the first drive of the game, 75 yards. The first drive of the second half of Vanderbilt, 75 yards. In terms of learning anything, I don't really know that I learned anything. Mm-hmm. But the biggest thing for me is, and what you have to find over the next 2 weeks is where are you going to get pressure on the quarterback, because there are certain personnel groupings that they play defensively that literally aren't going to pressure the quarterback. And I think teams are going to see those groups on the field. And guess what? The QBs that you're about to face, which is going to be way better than you faced at any point this season, they're going to be like, okay, I'm dropping back and throwing here because I know that I'm going to have time to throw the football against this. They that's the thing over the next 2 weeks for me. Not so much about the game against Vanderbilt, but where's the pressure going to come from consistently? Because most everyone has pressured Vanderbilt, except Georgia, really, for that matter, in terms of overall, in terms of numbers and consistent basis.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, you have that backside of this schedule, and I mean, you knew it was going to get tougher all along, but as you're not seeing that pressure, it concerns you all the more because you're running into some buzzsaws, if you will. Now, listen, guys, what we always do. You know how we always wrap up this first segment about what we learned, or like Brent said, not necessarily what we learned, but kind of what we saw and what we want to see. Now, going into this bye week, you now have a nice 7 weeks of kind of them establishing themselves, so to speak. So, Brent, last week you said that your word for the Dogs' identity as of last week was timing. So, this week, what's your word? What was the character of this team for you?
Refresh. Because you're going to need it.
Yes.
You're going to you got to find some juice, because this is likely upcoming the toughest 5-game stretch they've had in a long time. And yes, I'm including Georgia Tech in that. It's a rivalry game. It's on the road. Mm-hmm. So this 5-game stretch and who they're about to play, it hasn't been any tougher outside of SEC championship and playoff games over the previous 2 seasons for me.
Indeed. And Jarvis, last week when we talked about what that identity was for you, for the Dogs, you said self-awareness. How are you feeling on it this week?
I'm going to go with self-awareness again. Because like I said, you're going into the bye week. They need to understand that they got some guys coming back, as far as Amarius Mims. Hopefully he'll be back by that time, so you can start to get that offensive line in sync. Because, like you said, you're going to need it in the second half of this season, going down the stretch, because the SEC schedule is pretty doggone strong. And like you said, Georgia Tech, I mean, I know that it's been.
They're
Georgia
competent
Tech.
now.
They're competent. Yes, they're competent. Yes, that is the perfect word. They're competent right now. So don't come in there half slipping, because they will surprise you. Brent Key got those guys believing, and I think that they're gonna have to be self-aware going forward.
Indeed. Like you guys said, coming back off the bye, you've got Florida, number 20, Missouri, number 13, Ole Miss, number 17, Tennessee, wrapping up the season with Georgia Tech. So, they've got something ahead of them. We'll talk about that on the other side between the hedges. But before we talk about that, Jarvis is going to tell you guys a little bit about how you can take advantage of LinkedIn.
Listen up, guys. Jarvis Davis here for LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. Remember that website. I'm coming back to it. Guess what, guys? One of the things that you have to make sure that you do is, as a small business owner, is you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs help to find the right people for your team faster and for free. And that's the big thing, people. Free. It's free. You're going to get the best candidate for free. So all you got to do is just make sure you go to LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege and add your job and purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you like to interview and hire. And LinkedIn Jobs help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Yes, I'm talking about faster and free. Those are two F words that you have to love. I'm telling you. So go to LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Now, guys, going between the hedges this week is probably the toughest one so far. But like we said, the bye week couldn't come at a better time because the number one team in the nation, yes, they escaped Vanderbilt with a win Saturday, but of course not without a loss. That being Brock Bowers suffered an injury in that game, required him to undergo tightrope surgery. The school announced just yesterday. Of course, so far this season, 41 catches, 467 yards, 4 touchdowns, and just a force to be reckoned with that the Dogs are going to miss for 4 to 6 weeks. So, Brent, when you look at it, especially with him being Carson Beck's kind of number one favorite target, how's this going to affect him, especially as we've seen him ascend and grow along with Brock Bowers these first 7 weeks of this season?
Honestly, I don't think it's going to affect him or their offense much from how it looks. That's the key, the how it looks part.
Yeah.
The only thing I think you're going to see missing from this offense is the quick touches that you got Bowers, the quick RPOs, the quick screens. Like those are going to go to other people now. Those are going to go to Lad. Those are going to go to Dominic Lovett, things like that. But in terms of how their offense looks, they've already shifted from a majority 12 personnel to a mainly 11 personnel team, less tight ends. Like just now Delp plays the Bowers role. I still think, and like I looked at specifically up at third downs. In terms of target distribution on third down, Lovett with 8, Rara with 6, Brock with 6, Rosemary Jackson 6, Ladd 6. Like their target distribution for third down is even relatively deal. The key is that you just don't have the game-changing ability of Bowers and the after-the-catch ability. But in terms of how their offense is going to look and what they kind of do, I don't think it's going to look a whole lot different.
I think that's a great point, Brent, because, Jarvis, as we've started out, when we think about week 1 or week 2 of this season, we've seen that progression of the Dogs going to both Lovett and Thomas in those critical moments. And like you said, Oscar Delp he's competent. He's not going to obviously give you what Brock Bowers gave you, but you saw that evolution and kind of opening up this offense that makes you confident that there's at least the ability to pick up where they have to, leave off without Brock Bowers.
Yeah, it's like I think the biggest part of it is just from an emotional standpoint, because that's your guy. Like that's what you centered your offense around. So he's just should have been a Heisman candidate, in my opinion. Like I feel like if he had finished his season out, he should have at least gotten an invite to New York, because there's no doubt in my mind watching him, for these first 7 games, it's just like how can you not say this is one of the best, if not the best, college football player in football? So for me, I'm interested to see it, and from Carson Beck's standpoint, because like that's a safety net, right? I think we all can agree that Brock Bowers is a safety net in this offense, but I am interested to see what his relationships and rapport is with Dominic Lovett, with Rosemary Jackson, with Rara Thomas, and all those guys. And going forward. And then we're starting to see Lad McConkey getting a little bit more healthy. And we know what he was capable of doing when healthy last year, when they won a national championship. So the weapons are there. Like you just don't have Brock Bowers anymore. And I'm interested to see, now that you don't have Brock Bowers, I think defensive coordinator is going to have a little bit more of more difficult job now to try to, because who you going to key in on? Because like we know the capabilities of all those guys I just mentioned. I think right now you're just looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, I think this Florida game, a lot of people are going to be paying attention to that game because it's like, especially their upcoming opponents, because they're going to figure out like, okay, what is Georgia going to do? And I think that them being able to spread the ball around or having to spread the ball around a little bit more now, it's going to put Carson Beck in a very interesting situation. And I'm really interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah. And, Brent, I was thinking like who would actually be that guy who steps up. I don't know that there's necessarily guys, especially in like the pass catcher core, because I'll include the wide receivers and the tight ends because the ball has been distributed so evenly. But going back to something that Jarvis said earlier about the run game and what we've seen out of Dajun Edwards, obviously Kendall Milton is injured again, but Brent, do you expect there to be, and when I say an uptick, I mean like a natural uptick in that run game that is part due to Brock Bowers, but also part due to kind of how this offense continues to improve or has continued to evolve to this point in the season?
I don't know, actually. I think that's the great question, because one of the things that gets least talked about with Bowers is his ability to block.
Yes.
He is an elite blocker for his position.
Absolutely.
And so now within the run game and some of the things they do in the run game, that's now a Lawson Lucky job, combination of Lucky and Dell. I still think they're a throwing team. I still think that's what they're going to be. And I think in terms of target distribution, you're going to see everybody get one or two more each week. Lovett, like you saw it in the game, Lovett got the targets in the second half. He had the most receptions he's had since he's been there. So like it's just going to be, hey, everybody else kind of lift up a little bit here and rise up, if you want to go sort of as a local Atlanta phrase.
So Brent, let me ask you this before we wrap up the segment. If there's a guy that you want to see on that other side of the bye to say, hey, I saw you coming, but I really need you to, like you said, rise up in that second half after the bye week, who would that guy be for you?
It's a combination of Lad and Lovett.
Okay.
Like the two L's, because and Lovett, it's mainly because of how they've used him. Like the down the field ball that he caught at the end of the first half, like he hasn't really gotten many down the field targets.
Yeah.
His average depth of target this year is like a third of what it was in Missouri. So, that's him, and the down the field work with him. That's going to be the thing that I want to see step up. How
about you, Jarvis?
Oh, it has to be Rara Thomas, because I think that dude has he has a special skill set. I think that, if they are able to find him more so target him more so in the red zone, I think he can be a weapon for this team. So I think that, Rara Thomas is a guy that definitely needs to step up going forward.
Yeah, and I would just have to co-sign on all three of those because I'll have my eyes on them the same to see if they step up and become even more of that guy on the second half. But we'll talk a little bit more about what's next for Georgia on the other side. But before that, Jarvis is going to tell us a little bit about Prize Picks and how you can maybe have some more conversation with him through subtext.
What's going on, good people? Appreciate that, T. Jarvis Davis here for Locked On College Prize Picks. Yes, that's the website, but it's backwards. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. This episode of the Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Prize Picks. Here we go, guys. Prize Picks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projected stacks, and place your entry. That's all you got to do. I've always liked to test my skills because guess what? This football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. I'm telling you, they also offer weekly promotion that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday, each Tuesday. Prize Pick discount select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So guess what, guys? Now that you're convinced, now that you understand that you can get to this money, go to PrizePick.com/LockedOnCollege. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. All you gotta do is drop in the code LockedOnCollege. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnCollege. It's easy, guys. And also, you don't have to worry about waiting around for your money on this, playing on these big fantasy leagues that last 12 to 13, 14, 15 weeks. All you got to do is go to Prize Picks because it is daily daily fantasy sports made easy.
Well, we might have some conversation in a minute about getting to the money. But first, next up, picking up where we left off, Jarvis, and we thank our guy again, Brent Rollins, for stopping by. One of the things that'll be intriguing about this whole Brock Bowers injury situation is actually how long it keeps him out of commission. We already talked about the gauntlet of a schedule that the Dogs have on the back end, right?
Right.
That bye week, but we're hearing anything from 4 to 6 weeks. You, as a former athlete, know all too well that it's kind of tough to tell because everybody's body kind of reacts differently to surgery. But let's take it on both ends. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, he's absolutely a warrior. Where do you kind of think he might land in his potential return to this team?
Being that more than likely they're going to be as safe as possible,
Yes.
because I believe wholeheartedly Kirby Smart cares about the player more so than what he can do for him this year, and trying to pursue another SEC championship and then trying to go on to win a third straight national title.
Yeah.
People may look at me crazy when I say that, but I wholeheartedly believe that, because when you have the capability or the potential to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, I'm going to skew towards that 6-week range, because probably he could do the whole 4-week thing, but it just doesn't make any sense. And I use a value there for a reason. It doesn't make any sense. That's not going to make you any money trying to come back and play hurt, like regardless of the end result when you come back. So I think that overall, I would probably skew towards that 6-week mark.
Yeah.
And that essentially puts you towards the end out for the regular season.
Yeah. And this offense has actually done quite fine this season, having holes on both of the receiver room as well as in the ground game. So I feel like, and don't get me wrong, we all know that Brock Bowers is otherworldly. But if the point is how, to your point, how are they going to be able to get through this gauntlet of a schedule when you're talking about Florida, when you're talking about Ole Miss, when you're talking about Tennessee, Mizzou, et cetera, and Georgia Tech? I think we all agree that they should be, from the offensive side, they have the weapons. So they should be able to accommodate for that. The ground game is continuing to uptick. I think you make the better point earlier about this defense and being able to see more, especially if they're going to go up against the kind of quarterbacks they'll face. A, if they can get the pressure up front, and B, if the secondary can show improve, not just one guy, but the entire secondary, right? So I think that's where it might land, as far as not so much what we think we're going to see out of the offense, but hey, can the defense plug in some holes to make sure that the offense isn't carrying this team on its back completely in the wake of its best player going down? Now, here's the other thing. We talked about 4 to 6 weeks. We talked about whether or not Kirby Smart would err on the side of safety. I agree with you. He'll err on the side of caution, which would be 6 weeks, which takes you kind of right there up to the championship game, right?
Right.
So let's just say all sorts of scenarios can play out. They could get to the championship game. They could win it. They could lose it. They could get to the playoff. They could get to the CFP championship. But Jarvis, people have been saying this is a top 5, if not a top 3 candidate for the NFL draft come 2024. And this is a guy who, as long as he keeps that body as right as it has been for as long as we've seen him be just, like an Iron Man, for lack of a better term, he might be like some players we've seen in the not so distant past who are like, you know what? I'm good. I'm just sit this one out, because I got to make sure that I don't impact my draft stock or put myself in a position where I could get further injured or re-injure that ankle, because those high ankle sprains, they are tricky. So Jarvis, any scenario where we don't see him suit up in a UGA uniform ever again? Just saying.
I will put some money on that we won't see him again. But here's the thing. There's a wise man that came up with a song. And the lyrics kind of go like this. I'm not going to sing them because I might get in trouble from a copyright standpoint. I want to do all that. Must be the money that's turning me on. Must be the money. Must be the money.
I totally thought you were going to go and get the money, but okay. Everybody go get the money, but okay.
Yeah, and that would be my motivational speech as if I were to have a conversation with Brock. Go get that bread, dog. Like you got two natties, and Georgia will figure it out. They got so many 4 or 5 stars, leading receivers that have transferred into their program. They got all these big boy recruits at running back and offensive line. So yeah, they'll be okay.
Yes.
So yeah, if Brock is sitting to himself saying, you know what, man, I want to go with my teammates. Nah, man. Here we go. What would you rather do? Here's how I would present it to Brock. 6 weeks to get right, or 6 months to get right.
There it is.
6 months from now, what we looking at, T? April?
Yep. Let's do that. Hey, Jarvis, your math is on point today, boy. Your math is on
6 weeks or 6 months. Go get that money.
Okay. I agree with you because you just never know. You just never know what could happen. I mean, how many players have we seen? And Lad McConkey, no, dare we say Kendall Milton is probably your best example of a guy who, no matter how hard he tries, Jarvis, he keeps trying to get back. And we know what a special talent he is as well. And unfortunately, that body just can't get right. So you do look at situations like that and you say to yourself, that could be me. That could be me. And so I think about, and one who kind of comes to mind, and I know this is a little bit of a different situation because he is not necessarily on the level or was not necessarily on the level of a Brock Bowers, but, being that he was right in my backyard, LSU, Keyshawn Boutte said, no, thank you. No, thank you. And people always, and he's the most recent one. This trend has been actually there for about 4 or 5 years or so. But just thinking about him, he made a business decision. Now, like I said, LSU wasn't playing for a national championship. That could tug at the heartstrings a little bit differently. Wanting to be a part of and being an integral part of a potential three-peat. Totally get it if he comes back, but totally get it if he chooses not to.
Yeah. And Michael Parsons is another example.
Yes.
He set out that COVID year.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm cool.
I'm good.
Now he got drafted a little bit lower than expected. And then he probably should have. Should have been going for Let's know another conversation.
Yeah,
but
concur.
That contract is going to look exactly the same as it was if he got drafted.
Amazingly, he's still going to get the money.
Yeah. So he'll be totally fine. So Brock, you'll be fine, sir. I promise you.
Yes, you will. Yes, you will. And yeah, I mean, the good thing about it is, yes, a three-peat would absolutely be historic. But if you decided to walk away, nobody can ever take away the 2 you have. And that's the beauty of it for him to know that he was an integral part of those 2 championship runs. I think it's still a good look. Now, speaking of championship runs, Georgia is pursuing a historic three-peat. How much does not having Brock Bowers potentially for that backside of the run in the regular season and even in the championship game, and if they get to the CFP, how much does this impact their chances of getting back to the title game, especially because we know they still have some Eastern teams to play who are ranked this time around? Or do you think this is more about affecting their ability to get back into the college football playoff?
To be honest with you, I really feel like they have enough experience. They have enough guys who are playmakers, who have been deemed playmakers. Like you said, talk about the transfers coming in. Those guys were leading receivers, and Dominic Lovett and Rara Thomas.
Yeah.
Those guys understand what needs to be done and be able to make plays. It's just all on Carson Beck to get them to rock. And I think that he's put that on display. He had 3 consecutive games that he had over 300 yards.
300 yards, yeah.
So I don't think this is going to affect. It's a big blow. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's going to affect them getting to the college football playoff. Meaning, whoever they face in the SEC that comes out of the West, I feel like they still have a good opportunity of beating them just by looking at the landscape, right? So, and we know the SEC championship winner is basically an automatic bid to get into the college football playoff. So I don't think this is going to have that much effect at all.
I'd have to agree with you. I think that as long as they can get out of the regular season, and I'm kind of putting the best case scenario on the regular season, get out of the regular season undefeated, get to the SEC championship. And even if they lose, as long as they don't get blown the heck out, I could still see them making their way into that college football playoff and still making some noise, if not getting to the actual championship. So you're absolutely right. They got the tools on both sides of the ball to be able to do it. So we'll be watching, guys. Of course, we appreciate you guys stopping by and watching us here on the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. And we're also your home for the Braves party on Wednesday. And yes, we still have a little bit more Braves party left in us because we've got some postpartum to do with our guys tomorrow as we head into the Braves offseason. So for Jarvis Davis, for our guy Brent Rollins, I am Tenitra Batiste. And make sure you stop by the Atlanta baseball party tomorrow.